Good afternoon, everyone. Uh, I'm Loretta Garcia. I am the co-chair, along with Dale Miller Hill, of the Contemporary Issues Forum. Today's session will be recorded. We ask everyone to keep their microphone muted so that the speaker won't be disturbed, and there will be a question and answer session afterward. You may post your questions in the chat box, which can be found in the bottom ribbon of your viewer screen. And I just want to mention that our next speaker will be Peter Wilson, speaking on February 26th. And Peter is a consultant and senior analyst with the RAND Corporation. And he will be speaking to us about the Ukraine war. It's been 1 year since the war started, and he will talk to us about the current situation as well as any projections about the future of that war. So I will go ahead and turn it over to Dale, who will introduce today's speaker.
Greetings. For today, I'm pleased to welcome Candice Covin of the American Red Cross. She was my supervisor when I was a Disaster Assistance Team, or DAT, member on call. That meant that at all hours of the night, I would receive calls and go on site, where I sometimes found people standing in their pajamas, barefoot, after a house fire or a flood. It was a rewarding assignment, and I was very impressed with, first, how many family disasters there are in our neighborhood, how many more than we may have thought, and second, the extraordinary discipline and training programs which the Red Cross used to train both its staff and its volunteers. So Candice moved from that DAT supervisor role, which covered several counties, to her current post, where she is Senior Associate for Training for the Service to the Armed Forces Hero Care Center. In her 9 years with the Red Cross, she's also served in disaster assessment and mass care feeding, and as caseworker, emergency response vehicle driver, shelter manager, community presenter, and disaster instructor. She asked me to stress in the introduction that at the Red Cross, there is no such thing as a small disaster. In every case, it is the Red Cross's mission to help people affected by disaster to meet their emergency needs, including shelter, food, clothing, health, and mental health services. And there are also some chaplains on call for spiritual needs. Okay, over to you, Candice.
Well, thank you so much, Dale. And as Dale mentioned, I do work for the American Red Cross. I've been with the Red Cross, like Dale said, for about 9 years now. I started off as a volunteer. After I left the military, worked in pharmaceutical for about 10 years, and my husband retired from the military. And so we found that we wanted to do something more. We wanted to give back in some way, and we didn't know what it was, right? So I started volunteering with the Red Cross. After about a year, I knew this was it. I knew it was what I wanted to do. And so I was the disaster program manager for Montgomery County, Prince George's County for several years. Over the past, I think we have a live mic if we can mute the call. And then I moved over to the Service to the Armed Forces, where I'm at right now. I'm a Senior Associate for Training for our Hero Care Center. And the Hero Care Center, we provide assistance to active duty military members and their families around the world. And so I'm responsible for the training and the technical and the professional development of our call center agents that are stationed throughout the United States. So I still volunteer, as I do today, coming to you as a community presenter, preparedness presenter. And I also volunteer as an advanced disaster instructor, which means that we do a lot of the sheltering training for community partners, as well as our volunteers in our workforce. So I do a little bit of this and that because I really enjoy what I do. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you so we can talk more about what we came here for today. And I'm going to stop sharing my camera, only just two, so we can prevent that little distraction of me talking with my hands as much as I do. So if you can see my screen, a thumbs up would be great. Either drop it in the chat box or let me know that you can see the screen. Okay, great. I see you. Thank you so much. So we're going to talk about being ready for emergencies. You know, we would love to say that we would love to think that we can put emergencies on the calendar and we can be prepared, but that is not true, right? We know that disasters can happen anytime. And Dale mentioned that, you know, as a disaster action team responder, she would get those calls in the middle of the night. And it feels like disasters happen in the middle of the night, right? It's because when we're sleeping, we're not as attentive as to what's going on. You know, the house fires that happen, sometimes they're in a room where there's no one in the kitchen or something that's going on in the rest of the house. And so you're not really prepared when you're sleeping, right? And so we talk about preparedness before emergencies happen. We love to say, get to know us before you need us, right? So let's talk a little bit about that today. So let's first go over the mission. I know you've probably seen many missions over your career, over your lifetime. I will tell you, the mission that you see on the screen of the Red Cross, the American Red Cross prevents and alleviates human suffering in the face of emergencies by mobilizing the power of volunteers and the generosity of donors. I absolutely love our mission statement because it's those common bonds of humanity and compassion that brings us together, right? And it's not just in the face of emergencies and disasters, but it's also helping our neighbors too. And when we look at this statement here on the screen, this mission statement where it says mobilizing the power of volunteers, the Red Cross is 90% volunteers. 90%. I don't know of any other organization that has 90% of their workforce as volunteers, right? And then, of course, we're a nonprofit organization, so we rely on the generosity of our donors to provide services. So I know that when people think of the American Red Cross, we immediately think of either blood services or a CPR class. And oh yeah, we've seen some disasters on TV or in the news about Red Cross. So we have several lines of service. The first one that Dale was mentioning earlier is our disaster cycle services, our disaster services. And so we are the nation's premier emergency response organization. We provide that shelter, the food, the emotional support, the health services, the mental health services, relief supplies, and we do this every single day across the country, across the world. We also work with individuals and communities and businesses with recovery assistance following disaster, because we know that it can take weeks, months, and years for people to recover. The assistance that we provide immediately after a disaster is only meant to be temporary, meaning that we're just there to meet those immediate needs of food, clothing, and shelter. And so that need for additional services for rebuilding and all of that, that sometimes gets a little mixed because people think that we come in to kind of save the day and rebuild a home, and that's not what we do. But we do help with linking them to resources in their communities and other businesses that can help them. And then we have training services, formerly known as our preparedness, health, and safety services. And so those are our CPR classes. Those are the CPR, first aid, AED training. It's our swimming and lifeguard lessons. And so as a whole, for the American Red Cross, we have trained over 68,000 people in CPR, and that is huge. If you've been watching the news, especially with the NFL, if you remember a little over a month ago, when NFL Buffalo Bills player Damar Hamlin, when he suffered that cardiac arrest on the field, it was due to the skillful response by CPR and AED athletic training staff. But what people generally don't know is that the Buffalo Bills training staff that performed that CPR so well, they were trained by American Red Cross certified instructors, right? One of our instructors, her name is Erin Thornton, and she led a training session for the Buffalo Bills training staff back in June of last year. And so you can only imagine how honored she was to hear from the team after that on-field response. And it was really nice to see when you train so many people in CPR and life-saving skills, and to actually see that play out on actually national television. And she was nominated for the Red Cross Life Saving Award, which is the Presidential Certificate of Merit. So kudos to her. I'm really excited about that, because I too teach CPR classes over the years, and it's, like I said, it's life-saving. And then we have the biomedical services. We are the single largest supplier of blood in the United States. There is no generic for blood, right? So the Red Cross, we provide this nationwide, this blood system that helps us to be prepared to offer blood services 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And what's crucial is that there's no other organization that can provide the depth of service that we provide to nearly every community in the US and around the world. And then we have service to the armed forces. And so the Red Cross, with the service to the armed forces, we provide assistance to service members, veterans, and family members every step of the way. But we also have our Hero Care Center, which I work for. The Hero Care Center is for our active duty military members, as well as their families, where we provide that emergency 24/7 emergency communication assistance for them. And then, of course, we have our international services. And so the international services, because we get questions all the time about our international services. And so the American Red Cross is a part of the world's largest humanitarian network, right? And so this humanitarian network we work together with the Red Cross Society, excuse me. And so by working with the Red Cross Crescent Societies, we have teams that are positioned to handle some of the most urgent crises and natural disasters and conflicts and disease outbreaks all around the world. Just like we have disaster responders on call 24/7 for local responses, we have responders that are on call for disasters globally as well. And so when we have these folks that are globally ready to deploy, it's not just those immediate needs, but we also provide assistance with data management and IT telecommunications and cash assistance, cash aid, dispersing those funds, as well as providing operational leadership on those. So the neutrality and impartiality of the Red Cross, it's respected by governments and communities around the world, and it helps us when we're providing those critical services during our humanitarian work. And then, of course, what's not listed on the screen is our community preparedness, what I'm doing today. So we have free community preparedness presentations that we do throughout the communities. And it's not just for adults. We have preparedness presentations that we share with children through our Pillowcase Project program. It teaches, students how to prepare for local hazards and teaches them basic coping skills. We also provide information at community outreach events where we disperse disaster preparedness material and other life-saving information to the community. And we also provide the information in Spanish through our Hispanic outreach program to help Spanish-speaking communities. So lots of resources available to you, lots of lines of services, and every one of those that I just mentioned, there are volunteers every step of the way. So I'm just going to pause here for a moment to see if anyone has any questions or comments about anything that I've shared so far.
Okay, and this is Loretta. You can raise your hand by going at the bottom ribbon, or maybe it's on the top ribbon for you. There's a button called Reactions, and there's a raised hand feature there. And I don't see the inset. I don't know, Natalie, I don't know if you see the inset or not to see if there are raised hands.
There is one raised hand right now.
Yes, Catherine.
Okay, Catherine, can you unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yes, I was just wondering if the Red Cross is involved at all in the relief efforts in Syria and Turkey at the moment?
So the Red Cross, not Red Cross directly, but our Red Cross Crescent Societies, yes, they are. And it's so early right now that I can't give you any statistical data right now, but I can tell you that whenever there's a conflict or anything going on, Red Cross does have a presence. And it's definitely contingent upon the safe access and deployability of those folks. But yes, we do. We have folks all around the world. Anyone else? Okay, so I'll keep moving then. So again, whenever and wherever, I know that Dale asked me specifically to talk about some of our responses in Montgomery County and those areas. And I can tell you that most of the disasters that we respond to locally are generally fires. Recently, as you know, in Montgomery County, the explosion earlier this year, our responses locally here in the National Capital Greater Chesapeake region, we have disaster responders that will respond in their communities or they will respond throughout the region. And when I say throughout the region, we're talking about the DC metro area, DC, Virginia, Maryland, all the way up through Baltimore counties up into Delaware as well. So we have a really large region, one of the largest regions in the country. And our responders, again, volunteers, respond to these natural disasters as well as other man-made disasters. And again, these disasters, they can happen often without any warning, right? And they not only affect the people who've probably lost their home or displaced, but the people around. They can affect the whole community, you know, the infrastructure and other things that happen with disasters. So we already know that when disasters happen, and they happen often, right, or anywhere, you know, people are hurt or property is damaged or destroyed. And so we just want to talk about that a little more because we see the disasters on television, and I've never been to one disaster where someone said, I knew it was going to happen to me. I knew it was going to be next. No one expects it to happen to them. Some of the disasters that we face here in the National Capital Greater Chesapeake region are flooding. You know, I'm from Florida, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, but I love to share with people that I didn't see as much flooding down there until I came up here in the National Capital Region, where we see so much flooding from storms, hurricanes related weather coming through. The other thing is fires. You know, you don't realize how many fires we have, but we have fires almost every single day. There's a fire going on. I mean, and we're not talking about complex fires. We're talking about fires from space heaters because cords overheating, or someone leaving something on a stove, or a fireplace that hasn't been cleaned in years. So they're never really complex, but they are avoidable for sure, most of them. So when we talk about the hazards that we face, you know, here, like I said, in the National Capital, we have a lot of flooding, we have those home fires, but also around the country, you know, there's other things that go on to include, you know, volcanoes out there in Hawaii. We have the tornadoes that go across the plains. We have the wildfires. Seems like every year with the wildfires out on the West Coast. And so when we talk about these hazards, it's not just for your general knowledge, it's for sharing too, sharing this information with family and friends who may not be local, and they may experience some of these things that you see on the screen, and it's worth sharing. We love to tell the children when we go into the schools that we want them to share. As part of our presentation is asking them to share the information that they've learned. So we hope that you'll do the same. And if not sharing the information specifically, we can definitely point you in the right direction for free preparedness presentations, whether they're in person or virtual. So in any type of disaster that we've talked about, a lot of people assume that someone's going to be there to help, right? And the fact of the matter is that resources just are not there to support everyone immediately. You know, first responders, disaster organizations, government agencies, hospital, emergency rooms, everyone's doing their best to provide that assistance. But on average, these people, the first responders and the agencies, they're staffed and prepared for normal day-to-day operations. And so when an actual disaster, especially a large-scale disaster hits, the resources may be limited, right? So the truth of the matter is that we have to depend on ourselves first, and why do I say that? Because one, roads might not be passable during that time, utilities might be unavailable. There might be hospitals and first responders who just overwhelm themselves. And then, of course, the banks, the grocery stores, gas stations, pharmacies, all that, school, all of those are probably closed anyway, right? So you may need to think about other members of your household when we're saying prepare for yourself, because if you have neighbors that have functional or access needs or older adults, you definitely want to keep them in consideration when we're talking about being ready for an emergency. And again, do not count on receiving help right away. I can't stress that enough, because especially here where we live in the National Capital Region, we won't be the first priority. It's highly recommended that you be able to provide for yourself and take care of your immediate needs for at least 72 hours. And so all of us can and should be prepared to help others. And will you think of everything? No. And I say that because as much as I've shared these presentations in the communities, as much as I've, packed my go bags and I have my emergency kits, there's always something that I say, oh, I need to add that to my kit. Oh, I need to add that to my car or something. So it won't be perfect, but you can definitely be prepared. And what does prepare means? It means taking productive actions to be safe, react in the right ways, and being able to adapt to challenges, because some people are truly overwhelmed when disasters hit. And it's mainly because they haven't prepared for them. And so if you start considering those actions now, it's not to say everything's going to be perfect and everything's going to work out the right way, but at least you'll be able to recover quickly when those difficulties hit. And so the title of our session today, Be Red Cross Ready. And what does it mean to be Red Cross Ready? 3 things: get a kit, make a plan, and be informed. Literally, those are the 3 things that we ask people to consider. So I am going to turn my camera on for a second because I have a question for everyone. Those of you who, and I see a few people, I have a question. How many of you have an emergency kit? An emergency kit ready to go right now? Anyone?
Can you say what should be in it?
I sure am. I'm going to go over that emergency kit. And here's why I'm asking. Generally, when we say, who has an emergency kit? We'll see a few hands go up and they'll say, oh, I have a kit, I have a kit. And then my next question is, where's your kit? And so where do you think most people's kits are at, by the way?
In their car.
In their car. That's a good thing too.
In a closet somewhere.
In a closet. Christina, I see your hand up. Miss Christina, I'll wait. Yeah, so people say they have it in a car. I definitely have kits in my car, both my husband and I, because I was here doing Snowmageddon. That's when I first arrived here in the National Capital Region. Remember when all the cars were stuck on the Baltimore Parkway because of snow? I'm from Florida, folks, okay? So I was like, okay, this is gonna be interesting the next few years here. My husband retired from the military, so we ended up staying, but I know that I needed a kit in my car. And then someone said a kit in their closets, right? Well, here's the thing. If you're in an emergency, fire, or anything else, what are the odds of you going to look for that emergency kit in your closet? Probably not, right? Yes, and so when we talk about those emergency kits, we're saying we need you to have several kits, because some people say, oh, I have one. And so let's talk about what's in the kit. So in those emergency kits, there's a few things that you want to make sure you have. You want to make sure that that household kit, whatever that may be, that you have enough supplies for 3 days. 2 weeks is better. A go bag, that's that mobile version. It just has those quick supplies in case you need to evacuate quickly. You want to make sure that you have supplies for each member of your household. And then of course, customize, your bag for your own personal needs. We can make recommendations, but you need to make sure that you have what you need in there, and it may look a little bit different than what we recommend. And the whole purpose of that kit is to make sure that you have anything that you need immediately, like medications or something like that. So let's talk about what goes into that kit. First, the essentials. You know, what is essential for you every day? And this is not, it's not something that's a trick question here. You know, the basics that we need every day is food, water, and clean air, right? And those life sustaining items, you know, like maintaining your health. So just looking at the screen, you know, water. If you don't already, you should have at least 1 gallon of water per person per day. Lots of folks have water in their homes, and I always ask the question, is it just enough for you, or is it enough for everyone in your household? And the recommendation, again, is 1 gallon of water per day per person. And it may look a little different if you require additional water because of medications and all of that. I have a question for everyone. Does water expire?
Yes.
Yes. Does water expire? Yes. Anyone else?
Yes, I think if
Yes.
it's bottled, it would expire. It has a
So-
shelf life, let's say that.
Mhm. So the water itself doesn't expire, but the container that it's in can expire. And so when we have those like I have cases of water in my house, right? And should we be rotating the water as we bring it in? Based upon what we know now, that it's not the water, is actually the package that is in.
Mm.
Absolutely. If you don't drink water like that, you should be rotating the water. Here's the other thing. If the water has expired because because of the container it's in, the bottle, what should we do with that water? Should we throw it out? What do you do with that? Any recommendations for what to do with that water?
Water plants.
Water plants, or you could save it too for in case of an emergency. Might need it to flush the toilets, may need it to wash clothes, may need it for something else in the household as opposed to drinking it, right? So even if that water expires, there's some use for that water, and you know, recommend having that on hand as well. The other thing is food. You know, people ask all the time, you know, what type of food should I have in my emergency kit? Food you like to eat. I see people go and buy these emergency kits and they have food in there. And I look at it and say, well, that's great. What does it taste like? Well, I don't know. I haven't had an emergency yet. Let me share something with you. Doing an emergency is not the time to find out whether you like something or not, right? So, you know, buy those. I'm a big fan of MREs. I was in the military. I love MREs and they're really good these days. So how about getting some meals? And that can be whatever you want it to be, packaged on non-perishable meals that you can put in an emergency kit. Make sure it tastes good. You like it, and make sure you get enough for everyone in your household. Okay, don't leave them out. Especially for children. If you have children in the household, I don't think you want them to be eating fruit snacks and sugary snacks during a lockdown with no food or access to going out anywhere, right? So you definitely want to keep them in mind as well. Your medications, you want to make sure you have those on hand. And I always recommend that in your emergency kit, even if you don't have 30 days or a 60-day supply of medication, you at least keep those little, those little brochures that come with your prescriptions. Every time you get a prescription from CVS or any other pharmacy, you have a little pamphlet that comes with it, right? Take those and put those in your emergency kit if you can't put the medication in there. Why? In times of disasters or emergencies, we do have professional healthcare workers that will assist during times of emergencies. What they can do is help you to get prescriptions filled. But if we're sitting in a shelter or you're there and you're saying, I need my medication, I need help, and they ask you, what type of medication is it? And you tell them it's the little round white pill. True story, folks. The little round white pill is not going to be much help. Even with the professionals, they're going to need a little bit more information, right? So if you could at least tell them what the name of the prescription is, the strength, all of that information is critical. And our medical workers, they're not they didn't just raise their hand and say, I want to do medical. These are licensed doctors and nurses who help. So it's a really crucial that you have those medications, if not something that you can refer to as well. The other thing is, if you look on the screen, we see that little yellow thing. What's that thing there on the screen? Anyone know? Little yellow thing.
A radio?
Yeah, it's a weather radio, right? And remember how I said technology has improved so much over the years? With that little weather radio, they can do so much now these days, meaning that you can actually charge a cell phone from a weather radio now. Did you all know that? Did you know that you can just take that little adapter from an iPhone or Android and plug it into there and crank it? I mean, you're not going to get enough juice to look at a whole video on your phone or a whole movie, but it'll definitely give you that boost that you need, or enough energy to make an emergency phone call. So those weather radios, they come in small sizes, large sizes. I have a large one that I have here in the house. I have small ones that are in our vehicles, just in case we need to charge a phone. The other thing, the red thing that you see on your screen, you know, that little flashlight. Do you know that flashlights now, you have flashlights where you can actually crank for a charge as opposed to batteries? So there's a lot of different things that are available now that wasn't available years ago when we really depended on our emergency kits versus our cell phones, right? Because cell phones have become the new emergency device. If they have a cell phone, they can do anything, but that's not true, right? So the flashlights, I highly encourage you to take a look at those. Frankly, flashlights with batteries has failed me every time, meaning that the batteries expire. I go to use it, the batteries don't work. Then I thought I was really swift keeping up with the batteries, and then the bulb went out in the flashlight, right? So the new wave of flashlights, they're really nice. I highly encourage you to look into those. And again, with that food, I can't stress it enough. Make sure that the food that you choose for your household, it's really something that you enjoy eating. You keep an eye on the expiration dates and all of that. The other thing is, you know, customizing your kit. If you have a fur baby like I do, I have my little poodle that goes with me everywhere. I have to make sure that my little dog, my fur baby, has everything she needs in case of emergency as well. And that's with food, water, everything. And when I say water, making sure that I have a container for her, making sure that I have a collapsible crate for her. You know, the good news is that there in Montgomery County, if that's where you are, when they're looking at shelter sites there in the county, Montgomery County always keeps in consideration pets, trying to make sure that pets can stay with their owners, which is amazing because not all counties do that. Some counties will make sure that pet services is on site, and they'll usually have a pet trailer or something that you can take your pets in there and while you stay in the shelter. And so it's a little different across the board, but I can say in Montgomery County, I always loved that whenever they went into facilities looking at shelter locations, they always kept pets in mind so they can be there in the facility near the owners, which is wonderful. But definitely keep your pets in mind when you're preparing. Also, comfort items. You know, I can't stress this enough, especially with small children. Make sure you have something other than their cell phone or a portable electronic game for them to play with. And even for yourselves, you know, make sure you have photo books if that's what brings you comfort. Some books and games and stuff like that, something other than the digital sort, right? Because like I said, a lot of people, they say this is for an emergency, and then the items that they have, you know, is not necessarily for an emergency, or you need something to power it. I do want to add too that documents, your documentation. I don't know if you've ever lost a wallet or lost a purse and the contents of it. And I see Miss Christina shaking her head. Yes. How traumatizing is that experience trying to get all that stuff replaced? It's unfathomable what you have to go through to get documents replaced. And I say that because we see that every day, and people lose their wallet that has everything in it. And you can only imagine an emergency where you were able you were able to escape with no injury, but you lost everything in the home. Having those documents, copies of those documents in a secure place, whether it's with another family member, whether it's in a safety deposit box somewhere, or having it stored electronically in the cloud somewhere. It's important that you have copies of everything. And what's really good nowadays is that, you know, you can request additional copies of your Social Security card, additional copies of your birth certificate, all that stuff. You can get copies of that stuff now, right? And so having an extra set stored somewhere safely will help you in case of an emergency. So I have another question for the group. Where do you have your important documents stored? Where are they right now? Anyone?
In a filing cabinet and on the, yeah.
Okay, Miss Chris says she has hers in the filing cabinet. Anyone else?
All over the place.
Thank you for your honesty. They're all over the place. Yes. Anyone else? I'll tell you, something that I hear all the time is it's in my fire safe, right? And I'll never forget being deployed to Oklahoma when they had all of the tornadoes, and then immediately after the tornadoes, they had a lot of flooding that came through. And on one of the pictures that was posted on our national website for several months was I was standing there looking off in the distance, and there was a gentleman beside me, and people always ask, what are you two staring at? The landscape? Because it was beautiful, right? And I said, actually, we were standing where his house used to sit. The tornado came through and wiped out his house, and then the flooding, and there was nothing but the foundation left of the house, literally a big concrete slab. And where do you think he said all of his important documents and paperwork was at? In his fire safe. Where was the safe? Who knows, right? And so he thought he did everything correctly, but everything was gone, and he didn't have a backup. And what he was saying to me as we were out there looking, he was saying, I thought I was so prepared. I thought I was so ready, right? And so I'm saying, if everything you have, the important documents are in one place, in a safe, in a filing cabinet, consider an alternate place, or consider another place to store those documents so you can have access to those as well. Okay. And again, keeping in mind other folks that are in your household as well, not just yourself, right? And then, of course, anything else that you feel is necessary. There's a list there that we provided. There's a PDF that I'm sure Dale and her team has already sent out to you, but I highly recommend taking a look at that list. We give some other suggested items as well. And we encourage you to remember, things like extra set of keys, and make sure you have your diabetic testing strips, if you have those, or anything else that you think you would need in case of an emergency. I love to take a look around my house and say, okay, if I had to leave today, what would I need right now? And I literally say it with that type of urgency, what do I need? And that's what I consider putting inside my emergency kit and keeping it fresh. Remember how I said you should have a kit everywhere? Having a kit at work, or if you have any particular place that you go to often enough where it feels like a second home, or you're always there, you might want to have a kit there too. Vehicles, if you have multiple vehicles in your household, make sure that you have kits in your vehicles. They have a lot of cool stuff nowadays, especially for jumping cars. I've never had to jump a car, but I tell you, I have this cool kit in my car that it looks like a small battery, but is actually designed to jump start a car without an additional car. I don't know how it works. I'm not that technically inclined here, but my husband just swore by it and said, you need this in your car because you don't need another car to jumpstart. You just need this device here, which I thought was pretty cool. Also, extra clothing or blanket. This is huge because just because we're out and about and we say we're close to home and something happens, you're stuck in your car. Remember Snowmageddon, Baltimore, Washington Parkway, where people are in their cars stuck. Doesn't happen every day, but it could happen, right? So highly suggest that you consider putting some extra clothing in there, especially during winter months. Even in your go bag for home, having extra clothing, extra pair of shoes. I will add that in my home kit, the kit that I have, much to my husband's dismay for many years, my go bag sat by the front door in the foyer. And so it sat there while my kids were going through school because they knew that in case of an emergency, that was the go bag. And I'm not talking about a small bag. It was a medium-sized suitcase, like a travel suitcase on wheels. And in that suitcase had emergency change of clothing for myself, my kids, for shoes. We had the little thermal blankets in there. We had the flashlights, the portable radio, and a few snacks. But it always stayed there. And I always told them, if there's an emergency, grab that bag by the door, because that was our exit point. Even if we went out the back door, we knew we can go to the front door and we could grab that one big bag. I remember one day I was running late for a meeting, and I was in the car on my phone, and I remember calling and I told my son, I said, oh my gosh, I left my bag. I'm coming back to the house. Just grab the bag and be outside. I'll be there in just a few minutes. It was my purse that I forgot. Can you imagine what my son came out the house dragging behind him when I said, hurry, get the bag? He had the suitcase, folks. The emergency bag by the front door. It was so ingrained in him that, we got to have this emergency kit. It's there. It's for emergencies. And I laughed, but later on, I told my son what a good job he did, because it was in his mind that is the emergency bag when I was only talking about my purse. But I said, okay, they have it. They know what they're supposed to do in case of an emergency. So that was a good thing. So having those multiple kits ready to go, having anyone in your household trained about those kits. And then here's the other one, making a plan. It's nice if you have a kit, it's nice if you have a plan, but you got to share that plan. You got to share that plan with other people in your household. You got to share that plan with people outside of your household. And why do we say this? In times of emergency, you have people that are trying to reconnect with family members, right? They're trying to reconnect. Where are they? Did they make it out safely? Was everything okay? Having a plan about how you all respond to emergencies and what you do in case of emergency. For example, my children knew that if there was ever an emergency, that they would never try and save us. They would never look for us in a house, especially a burning house or anything else, or any type of emergency in the house. They knew to get out and run to, Miss Jackie's house. Miss Jackie was one of our neighbors. And so we always told them, if there's an emergency, you go to Miss Jackie's house. Miss Jackie knew that if anything ever happened, the kids come over there, they were the contingency plan, right? And Miss Jackie had a list of all of our family members' names and everything in case of an emergency. But they knew that was the plan. They knew that they don't go look for us. They knew that anything happened, that was our plan. That's where they knew we would first look, right? Simple as it may sound, a lot of people do not have plans. Even with the children, they don't have a plan for if anything or a disaster should happen. Traveling. We've seen many times where, roads are cut off and people just don't understand or know a different way to go home. Now, I will share with you, when I moved here to the National Capital Region, I was amazed. We have I-95, 295, 395, 495, and I believe there's a 695 here in the region, right? I come from Florida. We had 95 from Miami all the way up. There's 95, right? There's none of these extras. And I remember first coming here, and I would call my husband and I would say, I'm lost, help me. And I think the last time I called him, the very last time I called him and said, help, I'm lost, he said, okay, tell me where you're at, I'm on my way. And I told him, no, I'm past that. Come and get me. Come get me and I will follow you home because I'm so tired of this. But you know what I needed? I needed a map in my car. And thank goodness GPS started coming out, and now we have Google Maps and everything else. But what if that goes down and you don't have cellular data? Maps, right? And yes, they do still sell maps. Having a map in your car or a map of the area, that's something that most people don't use these days because we're so reliant upon technology, right? So highly recommend that if you don't have maps, maps are a good thing. Making sure that you're taking care of anyone with access or functional needs. Again, you want to be able to have extras, and lots of times we get rid of extra stuff, but you never know if you need an emergency. You never know if you're going to not have your primary source. So again, keeping all those in consideration. Again, refer to that sheet that I gave you. We went over some of this, include the right details, where to communicate, how to communicate, important records, where you'll stay, shelter in place, just so many different things to consider when we're talking about making a plan. And then on the screen here, you see you see a card there on the screen, right? And on the card, it says, memorize the emergency contact. And I can't stress the importance of knowing contact information. What's kind of concerning, well, not kind of concerning, it is concerning when we go into the schools, especially with the elementary school children, and we're talking about from about ages, probably 3rd grade to 5th grade, and we'll ask them, how many of you know the household members in the adults in your household? How many of you know their phone numbers, right? What do you think all the children do when we ask them about phone numbers? I'm sorry, Miss Christina, I see you talking, but I can't hear you.
It's in my phone. That's probably what they say.
Exactly. The kids, they all pull out their cell phones, and I say, okay, put your cell phones away. Somebody tell me what the phone number is. And it's so shocking that children don't know phone numbers anymore. They don't know the phone numbers of their parents. Some of them barely know the phone numbers for their own house because they rely on the technology so much. Years ago, we used to have this little thing that we would put numbers and names and phone numbers in. Anybody remember what we used to call that? Anyone? It's not a trick question.
An address book.
Yes, Miss Catherine, an address book, that little thing that we used to all have, and some of us still have them, right?
Uh-huh.
We rely
Yes.
so much on technology where no one even has a little address or contact book anymore. And so we highly encourage you to have the address book, because we can have hundreds of numbers in a phone, but it does no good if you don't have access to technology, right? Or you don't have access network capabilities or Wi-Fi or whatever it takes, right? So again, even with our younger household members, making sure that they all have that information and knowing where to find it. And I hear one open line. If you can mute your phones for me, please.
Yeah, I'm trying to find it. If you can mute yourself. Also, there was a question way back when you were talking about bottles expiring.
Mhm.
Somebody asked about a glass bottle. Is that true for glass bottles expiring as well?
No, it's not the glass bottles. Thank you for asking. And so if you have any comments that I missed it in the chat box, doing this thing virtually and presenting, it's like walking and chewing gum. I don't always get it right. So definitely unmute yourself if you have any questions or comments. We'd love to hear from you. And then, of course, be informed. This is huge, because knowing how your community warns of disasters, that's really important. Some communities, they have outdoor sirens, right? Others depend on social media or smartphones or different types of text message alerts. I know Montgomery County has a wonderful text alert system because I receive them all the time. So I think they're great. Also knowing, what radio station to listen to. I don't know how often people listen to radio stations outside of being in their cars, but you can find most radio stations on those battery powered weather radios or the crank weather radios. Know what stations to listen to find out important information, if your power is out, or, if you have to leave the area. Know the difference between a watch and a warning. A watch means there's potential for a specific type of weather event or hazard. But a warning means that a specific type of weather or hazard is imminent or it's already occurring. So you should definitely know the difference between those two. Make sure that you follow instructions from authorities. Again, that's huge, because, when you don't have a plan in place, and there's an emergency, especially if you're trying to get to a loved one, family members, friends, and although someone's saying you can't go in that area because there's a hazard, or something, there's something imminent that's already occurring or something like that, you know, you're trying to get to a loved one because you don't have that plan, right? You don't know what's happening with them and you're trying to provide assistance. And so we want to make sure that we're paying attention to authorities and making sure that, you know, we're trying to stay safe and they're trying to keep you safe. And if you have a plan, then it kind of takes a little bit of that out of the equation. And then, of course, knowing what to do when you're traveling. Can't stress that enough. Emergencies happen when we travel as well, especially when we're going outside of the region into other places. And I would be remiss if we didn't talk about emotional health, you know, after a disaster. It's overwhelming. And when I say overwhelming, there's lots of things that happen every day that are not all related to natural disasters. We have other emergencies that we respond to. And when I say we, I'm talking about the American Red Cross and providing services. We do respond to, you know, shooting events and other tragedies that you see in the news. We have licensed healthcare providers and mental health providers that provide assistance. We still go in and provide sheltering opportunities as requested by our partners. And so disasters in and of itself can be stressful. I see Miss Chris's hand up, so let me pause here. Miss Chris?
I had a couple of comments.
Sure.
Even a member of our congregation happened to be out of town. They had a fireproof, waterproof safe where they could keep their belongings. And while they were away, a electrical fire occurred that burned down their entire house. So they were out of town. They only had some of their papers, and you know the church helped. But what a huge disaster, and that was not caused by a natural disaster or anything that was predicted. And then it took. So one of the other issues is to check to make sure you have sufficient insurance to step in and take care of what's going to happen if something as horrific as that happens.
Thank you
That's
for
one of my takeaways from that.
Absolutely. And I can't stress the importance of those documents. You know, my children are adults. They're grown. They've all left home. It's just my husband and I. But to this day, my adult children, especially my married son with 2 grandchildren, they still send me copies of their important documents. And all I do is scan them to the cloud, and I maintain copies of everything because they know mom keeps everything, and I keep most of it in the cloud. I have hard copies as well, but I keep everything in the cloud because it's good to be able to access that. If I lost my entire wallet, it's not to say it's going to be that it'll be easy to replace those documents. It'll just be easier because I have something to reference and something to say, these were my documents, right? So keeping those documents, yes, you must keep them in a safe in your home, but have an alternate place for those documents for sure. And then the other point that you made was that, you know, that person was at home and they lost everything. And here's the thing, Red Cross cannot make anyone whole. There is no agency that can make anyone whole after a disaster. It takes all of these different communities and resources to assist someone who's been displaced by a disaster or affected by a disaster. And that's one of the things that we stress the most during our casework and recovery process. You know, we respond to those emergencies immediately when we're contacted by local officials, whether it's Office of Emergency Management or whether it's the fire department, whomever's calling, we respond, but it's only for those immediate needs. Food, shelter, and clothing immediately is not long-term. And so immediate could be 72 hours, could be a shelter, maybe a week or so average, but it's important that they know what resources are available. And again, you all are very fortunate there in Montgomery County. There's a wealth of resources. And when I say a wealth of resources, whenever we have people displaced by disasters, it was amazing to see the number of agencies and amount of support Montgomery County offers in relation to other counties. So you definitely have a great resource of nonprofit agencies, and there's a whole list of them. I won't even go down the list of them, but if you've been there a moment, you know that Montgomery is really leading.
Candice, I see there's a question from Hamid Aziz. I think he has unmuted himself.
Yes,
Hamid,
yes.
if you go ahead and ask your question.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good to see you. Good to hear you, even though this remotely. Miss Candice, first of all, thank you very much for this information.
Sure.
In my opinion, I have seen disasters, and in the disaster that I have seen, the whole society stopped working, from the traffic lights to the cops to the McDonald's. Nothing worked, or so. And I think, in my humble opinion, your emphasis on documents is highly misplaced. Every document is available when you need it with some difficulty. Your driver's license, my citizenship papers, my passport, and so forth. If the government exists, it can be found without having a copy of it. So, in my humble opinion, this is a misplaced idea. Now, disaster comes in multiple flavors. We are seeing the disaster in Turkey, Syria right now, and you can see the pictures of it. And you can see the disasters in of the tornadoes, as well as the floods, so forth. So I think your suitcase, it should be smaller than your wallet, where the idea that you have some people who can assist you, your next door neighbor. To me, it is beyond imagination that you are in disaster mode and your neighbor is able to help your children. I don't get it. How small that disaster could be. But nevertheless, whatever paper that you need, it should be smaller than your wallet. But the last thing I want to say is that we live in a highly organized society. My electricity, my water, my phone, my police, my fire department, my library, I can go on, for 2 hours in telling the things that I need from the society to make me sustain myself. So to pick up one item is misplaced. The only thing is to save yourself, make yourself go someplace where other people are also there who can assist you. And that should be the end of it, because the simplicity is the essence. If you don't believe me, once again, take a look at the picture in Syria. End of my spiel.
So thank you so much for stressing the importance of your safety. And I know you joined just a little bit later, but one of the things I stress is having those documents, not because it makes the process, it's easy to obtain documents, it makes it easier. And here's the point. When there's disasters and there are different organizations providing assistance in the communities, there are some places that they require identification. If you can only imagine, after losing everything and you have someone saying, identify yourself, show me something, show me anything, show me something, and you have absolutely nothing to share. And when you're trying to work on your recovery, trying to find somewhere else to live or replace credit cards or banking, anything, identification, something. And so when we say save it, and we're not talking about the next door neighbor with documents, you may want to save that with someone who's outside of your immediate area, probably 30 miles or so, or perhaps save it in the cloud. Again, it's just to make those things easier. We have agencies that can be there to assist with document replacement, but they take time. Nothing is immediate when replacing personal documents. So it's just the backup, and it's just saying, try to be prepared. And one of the first things I said is your preparation is not going to be perfect. We're not saying that you're going to be ready for everything. What we're saying is at least try and be ready. And these are some of the basic things you can do. No one can plan for the disasters that are taking place right now around the globe, right? And when I say around the globe, even, out there in California with, the snow and then the fire and the wildfires and so much going on. And unfortunately, every news event takes precedence over the last. Doesn't mean that they've all recovered and everyone's doing well. It just means that this is what's in the news right now. Right now, Turkey with over 20-something thousand people. So there's no way we can prepare for everything. We're just trying to tell you a few things that you can prepare for right now. some things that you can do that you can help you and your family. And I can tell you that when we respond to emergencies every day, whether it's local fires or anything else that happens right here in our own neighborhoods, some of the things that we hear, you know, it was some of them just didn't know how to be prepared or knew that they should have done it, and they never expected it to happen to them. And so at a fire, it's a little bit too late to tell folks, you know, you should have had some smoke alarms in your house, or you should have had an emergency kit in your car, or this or that. It's too late. So we just try and get ahead of it like we are right now, because that's part of what Red Cross does: preparedness, response, and recovery. And preparedness is when we're sitting here right now with no major emergencies going on with us right now. We can talk about the things to do just to be better prepared. So thank you so much for that. But I truly appreciate that. And I think someone's tapping their finger on my on their wrist right now, telling me I'm almost out of time.
Candice, there was one other question earlier. Christina Shu, I don't know if you still have your question. We didn't get to you.
Candice?
Yes.
Are you there?
Yes.
This was a great presentation, especially about the kit. My question was, what's your relationship, or how does it work with the Bethesda Chevy Chase Rescue Squad and the fire department? And my second question is, for a long time, I've wanted to become, I want to be able to know how to do CPR, and I think you offer that. So those are my two questions.
Yeah, so thank you so much for those questions, Christina. So with the fire departments, when we receive those calls, because people, you know, sometimes we get calls through our 1-800 number and someone's requesting assistance. And the way that it works is that we receive calls from the fire department or emergency management when there's events that take place in the communities, right? And when I say we receive calls from the fire department, literally the fire department's dispatch will dispatch to the American Red Cross, sometimes while they're still on the scene putting out the fire because there's families displaced. It's not the fire department is there to put out the fire, right? They're not there to hold the homeowner's hand and tell them, this is what we're going to do in your next steps for recovery, and let's find out if you have a safe place to go. That's not what the fire department does, right? So they call upon the Red Cross to provide those immediate services. And depending on the scale of it, it may mean open up shelters, but we do all of that in collaboration and partnership with the county and those local resources. Sometimes there are incidents where we will respond and we may be the first ones on the scene. That's usually most of the time. We'll be the first ones on the scene providing that immediate assistance. And Ms. Christina, you asked a second question. You asked about CPR and first aid. And so right now, the CPR classes that we offer, whether it's first aid, CPR, AED, a combination of all three or just one, those classes can now be requested online. Everything is online, but there's also a number that you can call as well. We do have a free hands-only CPR course that we offer in the community, because we're saying if you can't do full CPR, something is better than nothing, at least hands, if nothing else. And we do that for free presentations in the community. So if you haven't taken a CPR class, I highly recommend that you take it. You can take them online, you can take them in person, you can do like a hybrid, do the skills online and then do the assessment in person. So there's so many different ways you can take that. And I'm going to provide all this information to Dale and those and Miss Loretta after this call, and where she can share that with you all. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And children, really quick, I'm almost finished, Dale, y'all hang in there with me. Children, children are really resilient. Okay. And when I say very resilient, they really can't grasp everything that's going around with emergencies, with the disasters. And, when we were in school, anyone remember what you learned in school about fires? What's the first thing that comes to your mind when I say that? What do you remember from school about fires or growing up?
Stop, drop, and roll.
Yes. People never fail to forget stop, drop, and roll. Do you all know that we don't even teach stop, drop, and roll in our presentations with children anymore? We don't teach stop, drop, and roll because that's assuming they're already on fire, right? And we want them to stop, drop, and roll. So what we say now is get low and go, get out, stay out. Those are the things that we're teaching children now. When we say get low and go, get low as you can in case of a fire and go, get out of the house. And then we say, get out and stay out. So we have all these little phrases that we use now when we go into the schools and we're talking about preparedness. And so when we talk about the preparedness for the children, we also do coping skills that we go through with the children as well. So again, something to look at if you, if you have different community organizations that you're part of or you know of. We've gone to churches and Sunday schools and given preparedness presentations to children. Why during Sunday school? Because one church said, you know what, we can't find another day of the week where we can get all our children together, but we know they'll be there for Sunday school. So we went in and taught about 200 kids the Pillowcase Project, talking about preparedness. We've had Girl Scout, Boy Scouts. We've even had one request where a lady, she had about 20 kids at a birthday party for a child and said, could you come in and do the preparedness for the kids at the birthday party? Of course we can. So we have programs for children, and it just helps them to kind of build that confidence before disasters, and keeping in mind that when we're talking to children, we never use the word disaster. We always use emergencies, because disasters is a really big word for them to grasp, right? So we just say emergencies. And then of course, providing that that supportive assistance afterwards as well. So some of the tools, remember, we already talked about the emergency contact cards, like the address books, but also we have a safe and well site. And what's the safe and well site? That's where you go and you register yourself, your family on this site. And for example, when I see hurricanes coming through down in Florida, right? All of my family is down there in Florida, from Miami all the way up to Jacksonville. And I always ask them, did you register on the Safe and Well site? Did you register? Because they have to register and I have to register. And let's say they can't, for some reason we lose contact for whatever reason, they can go out there on that Safe and Well site. They can send messages, say, I'm okay. And it's through the Red Cross network where we can stay in contact if needed. We've never had to use those services, but it's available, but most people don't know about it. The other thing are the apps. There's apps out there. The Red Cross offers free apps where you can go out there and download information about shelter information. And this is around the country. This is not just limited to our area. You can literally go in there and put a zip code in. You can find out about shelters. You can find out about first aid and CPR classes. All of that is available for free. They even have pet first aid. Pet first aid, yes, for your little fur baby, CPR and stuff like that. You can find out more about those classes that are on those apps as well. So if you don't have those, I highly recommend that you download our apps. Again, the sheet was already sent out to you, the PDF about the Be Red Cross Ready checklist. Know what disasters affect your area. It may not be the same for everyone. Have that plan. And not only do you have a plan, but everyone in your household, they know the plan as well. Have your kit. Can't stress the kit enough. I have several. Depends on what you need, what you want, whatever meets your needs. And then of course, at least one member of your household is trained in CPR and first aid. And then the next one is the download the Red Cross app. Again, this information, I will share this with Dale and those. I do want to close the presentation. I do want to tell you how I came to be with Red Cross. And I told you all earlier, I was, looking for something meaningful to do, and just wanted to serve in some capacity. Was in the military, husband retired from the military, and we just wanted to serve. And my husband, he's been a volunteer for about 8 years now. He deploys more often than I do, and I work for the Red Cross because he has more time in his retirement life to deploy. But one of the things one of the primary reasons why I came to Red Cross is several years ago, I was at home, and my next door neighbor's child, about 2 doors down, she came over and she was banging on the door, and she was saying, Miss Candy, come, my mom needs you. And when I open up the door and I see a child saying, my mom needs you, come to our house. And I was kind of reluctant because I was like, well, what's going on? And she said, my mom needs you. So I go down to her house about 2 doors down. And before I go into the house, I hear a lot of screaming in the house. And she ran inside and she was running upstairs and she was like, come on. And I was like, oh, what's going on? Because I don't want to run into a house that, I don't know what's going on. But I hear the scream and I go up there anyway, up the stairs in the house, and I see her mother and her older sister in one bedroom, and the mother was crying and screaming, and she was saying, help, help. I see the father. The father's about 6'2". He was in another room and he was standing there. He had something all over his chest and he was saying, I brought him back. And I was saying, brought who back? What is going on? Did anyone dial 911? It feels like everything stood still in that house. It really didn't. It was only a couple seconds. But I remember looking on the floor and I saw their son, 10 years old. He was laying on his back. And I looked at the father and the mother and I'm saying, what happened? Is he okay? And the father kept saying, I brought him back. What I remember next, because this has been some years ago, what I remember is the ambulance, the paramedics come in there. And I remember them putting the boy on a stretcher and they were taking him downstairs. And to this day, I can see his hand where it fell off the stretcher and it was hitting the banister on the way when they were taking him down. And I was like, oh no, this doesn't look good, right? And I followed them to the hospital. I got to the hospital with them, and long story short, the little boy died. He died because he had an allergic reaction to peanuts. And he had his medication didn't work. It was expired. People say, oh, you know, it works, but it was expired, it didn't work. And several months later, when the mother was able to talk to me candidly, and I remember her saying that I asked her, why did you come to my house? Why did you come 2 doors down and knock on our door? And she said, because I knew you were in the military. I knew your husband had retired. And I see that you work for the Red Cross because they could see my shirts and stuff that they see me leaving the house. And they said, if anybody could help, I thought it would be you. And I remember when I went into that house, excuse me, this was before I volunteered, they saw my husband in his military uniform and stuff. But when, and so I said, yes, we were in the military, but you know, I had let my CPR and all that lapse. I wasn't taking the courses anymore. I just wasn't doing it. And she said, I thought you all could help. And I know she felt bad, but I felt even worse because they saw our uniforms. They saw my husband's uniform. They knew that he was in the military and all of that. And I said, I was asked to help and I couldn't help. And it was just based upon what she thought she knew, right? And so that's when I started volunteering with the Red Cross. That's when I said I wanted to give back, right? And so now, even when I go out in the community with that Red Cross logo, I get all types of questions about the Red Cross, either whether it's CPR or whether it's volunteering. And I always feel that obligation to know this stuff. And that's one of the reasons why I continue to volunteer as well as work in the Red Cross, because I know we provide a valuable service. I will say too, that the little boy, when I said that when I walked in the house and the father had something all over his chest, what he had on his chest was vomit. When he was doing the compressions on a little boy, he's a big guy. He started doing the compressions, the child started to vomit. And so that's why he assumed that the child was breathing again, right? And so with that said, I've learned so much through experience of why these classes, the preparedness, CPR classes are so important. And it brings me to where I'm at today of trying to educate the community. And I would say, based upon the information, even if it's this big that you learned from today, I ask that you take the next steps in preparing yourself, preparing your family, and sharing what you've learned, just to help our own communities, your own household. So that's my presentation for this morning. I truly appreciate the time that you've all given me to share my passion with you. Thank you, Dale, so much for reaching out. It was a pleasure working with you and the county, and I hope that we have the opportunity again.
Thank you so much for presenting to us. There were a couple questions about what will be available to people. We do have the PDF on what tips for emergency preparedness were given today. We will not be sending out the PowerPoint, but I have recorded the session and I can share the link for that YouTube recording of the session. So I know Chris Hager had asked about it. I think Bruce Davis asked for a previous slide. So I will send it to you both. But if anybody else wants it, please contact me or Dale by email, and we can send you that link to the YouTube presentation. And let's please thank our speaker. We do really appreciate everything you informed us with today, Candice.
Absolutely. Thank you again.
Thank you.
You're welcome.